Rain whispered against the hospital windows that night. The corridors were half lit, half empty, the kind of silence that only deep midnight could bring. Somewhere between the flicker of fluorescent lights and the faint beeping of distant machines, David Carter pushed his mop across the cold, sterile floor. He was the night janitor, invisible to most, a ghost moving between rooms that life had momentarily left behind. His back ached, his hands rough from bleach and years of labor. Yet, there was a quiet dignity about him, the kind that came from doing what had to be done, no matter who was watching. His shift was almost over when he heard it, a soft, fragile cough coming from room 314. He frowned. That room was supposed to be empty. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the door. Inside, under the dim light, an elderly woman sat upright in her bed. Her hair was silver, her skin pale as porcelain. An oxygen tube rested beneath her nose, and her trembling hands clutched a faded photograph. "Oh, I'm sorry," David said gently. "Didn't mean to intrude, ma'am. I thought this room was vacant." The woman smiled faintly. "It usually is," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But they said I could stay here for the night. I didn't want to be alone." David stepped inside, uncertain. "Are you all right? Do you need me to call a nurse?" She shook her head. "No nurses tonight. They've all gone home. Just an old woman trying to remember how it feels to talk to someone." He nodded, glancing at the clock. He had 15 minutes left before his shift ended. He should have gone home. He needed the bus, the last one left in 20 minutes. But something in her eyes, deep, lonely, kind, held him there. He pulled up a chair. "Mind some company then?" Her smile widened just a little. "It's been years since anyone offered." They talked. She told him her name, Margaret Hale, 73 years old. Once a piano teacher, once a mother, once a wife. She had lost them all, one by one. First her husband, then her son, then her music. David listened, nodding, his mop forgotten beside the door. He didn't say much about himself, just that he worked nights, that he had no family nearby, that he once dreamed of being a teacher too. Margaret's eyes softened. "You have a gentle soul, David. You remind me of my son. He was about your age when he..." She stopped, her voice catching. "I'm sorry," he murmured. She reached out, her hand trembling, resting on his. "Don't be. Life takes and gives as it pleases. We just keep going." They sat in silence after that, two strangers connected by something unseen, something tender. Outside, thunder rolled softly, and the rain turned heavier. David checked the clock. 1:12 a.m. He had missed the last bus. He sighed quietly. Margaret noticed. "You should go home, dear." He smiled faintly. "It's fine. Home can wait." By 2 a.m., she had grown tired. Her voice faded to whispers, her eyelids fluttering. "David," she murmured, "would you do me a favor?" "Of course. There's an old piano in the chapel downstairs. I can't play anymore, but if you go there tomorrow, play something for me. Anything." He nodded gently. "I don't really play, ma'am. But I'll try." Her eyes glimmered with something like peace. "That's all I ask." Moments later, she drifted into sleep, her breathing slow and steady. David stood up quietly, turned off the bedside lamp, and stepped back into the hall. He walked toward the janitor's closet, but something strange caught his attention. At the end of the corridor, a man in a dark suit stood waiting, umbrella in hand, staring at him. The man stepped forward. "Mr. Carter." David blinked. Yes." The man's tone was polite but firm. "Your ride is here." "My ride?" "Yes, sir." He gestured toward the glass doors at the hospital's main entrance. Outside, through the rain, a black limousine gleamed under the streetlight. David froze. There must be a mistake. "I don't." Miss Hale insisted, the man said, handing him a small, folded note. She made the call before she was admitted. David opened it with shaking hands. Inside, in looping cursive, were the words, "For the man who stayed when no one else would, M.H." His chest tightened. She planned this. The man simply nodded. "If you'll come with me, sir." David followed, numb with disbelief. The limousine door opened with a soft click, and warmth enveloped him as he slid inside. The seats were leather, the scent faintly floral, lavender, maybe. There was an envelope on the seat beside him. He hesitated, then picked it up. Inside were two things, a letter and a check. He unfolded the letter first. "Dear David, you stayed when you didn't have to. You listened when no one else did. I saw in your eyes the same kindness my son once had. You reminded me of the goodness I thought the world had forgotten. I have no family left, but that doesn't mean I have no one to care for. What little I have, I leave to you, not because you asked, but because you gave something far rarer than money, your time. Don't waste your gift, David. Use it to find your purpose again. Margaret Hale. His hands trembled as he read the check, $250,000. He sat back, staring out the window as the limousine pulled away from the hospital. The city lights shimmered through the rain, a blur of silver and gold. For years, David had lived quietly, paycheck to paycheck, invisible in a city that never stopped moving. But tonight, because of one act of kindness, everything changed. The driver spoke softly. Where to, sir? David didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted to the hospital disappearing behind them. Could you take me to the chapel first? He said. The driver nodded and turned the car around. Inside the hospital chapel, the air was still and sacred. The faint scent of old wood and candle wax lingered. At the center stood an old piano, ivory keys yellowed with age. David sat down. His hands hovered over the keys, unsure, awkward. Then he pressed one, then another. A melody, slow, uncertain, began to fill the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere, and in that empty chapel, as the rain continued to fall outside, he could almost hear her voice again, soft, encouraging, proud. Weeks later, David didn't return to the hospital as a janitor. He donated part of the money to rebuild the hospital's children's ward and used the rest to enroll in a community college music program. He wanted to learn, to really play. Every Friday night, he returned to the chapel and played for her. Not because he had to, but because she believed he could. The nurses often whispered about him, the quiet janitor who now played the piano like someone who had known both sorrow and grace. And sometimes, when the night grew deep and the moonlight fell just right, he would glance toward the corner of the chapel, where he could almost see her sitting, smiling softly, whispering, "That's perfect, David." Months later, a new plaque was placed outside room 314. In loving memory of Margaret Hale, who found kindness in the quietest of hearts. David visited it once, on a rainy evening much like that first night. He placed a single white rose on the windowsill and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing me." Outside, a familiar limousine waited, not for wealth, not for status, but as a quiet reminder of how one act of compassion could change a life forever. He looked up at the rain, the hospital lights glowing in the distance, and walked toward the car. This time, the road ahead didn't feel lonely. It felt like a beginning.